The balanced data slate for Warhammer 40,000 is finally here, and in this video we're going to be covering all the different aspects that are going to significantly affect the rules of the game. So we're going to be taking a look at those factions that have been massively buffed up and made to be better, whether they're underperforming in the meta as it stands, or maybe some of those armies that have been slightly toned down. So that's going to be coming up in this video, the ins, the outs, everything you need to know, and also the application and the implementation of how that's going to affect your army design, your list when you get to the tabletop.
It's time now to take a look at the brand new balanced data slate for Warhammer 40k. We're going to take a look at the changes, the impacts, and everything that this will mean for your armies and games of Warhammer 40k. Michael, we're going to go through these in army order or alphabetical order. What's the first faction we're going to discuss today?
Okay, so we're going to start with the Adeptus Sororitas. Normally we would start with some of the core rules changes, but there haven't been any changes since the last balanced data slate. So all of the stratagem changes across the board, everything like that is still there. Nothing's changed. So the first army to look at is Adeptus Sororitas. They have had a change.
Okay, and what is that change?
So the way that they generate miracle dice has kind of been rolled back to what it was previously. So you generate miracle dice now, start of each battle round. This has not changed, but also each time an Adeptus Sororitas unit is destroyed.
Nice.
So instead of at the end of a phase, if any are destroyed, you get them, it's each time.
So what impact is this going to have then for Adepta Sororitas players? Is this a positive change, do you feel?
Yeah, so this is great. This means that potentially you'll have more miracle dice in your pool. You won't be punished for losing a lot of assets in one phase, where you'll only get one miracle dice out of it, but it also affects list building. Because now people that are writing lists for sisters will go, okay, I can include 3 units of Archiflagellants.
Yeah.
Because I know they're going to die, they're going to generate me miracle dice per unit. Whereas before it was like, well, it doesn't matter how many units I lose, I still only get 1 miracle dice. So this is great, and a step towards making Adeptus Sororitas maybe hit the competitive scene a bit more.
Yeah, because after the previous balanced data slate, they kind of got nuked into oblivion, didn't they, with all the changes and with the reaction to obviously miracle dice and stuff. And now this is just kind of maybe giving them a bit more back, which is good to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And they had a sprinkling of points changes as well, which you can check out in our points video.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, what is the next faction?
Adeptus Custodes. No changes.
No? Okay. Did we expect any?
Probably not.
No?
I think I was expecting the bikes to get nerfed because Stephen's been doing quite well with them.
Yeah.
No changes for Custodes. None at all. I don't think anyone was really expecting it. They're not doing amazingly at the moment.
No, and they have had a new detachment, I guess.
Yeah.
So it kind of, maybe that's more of a, well, let's see how they do with a brand new detachment and play as well, see how that affects different units. But like you said, they weren't breaking or doing terrible in the competitive scene. They were just kind of like leveling out a little bit, weren't they?
Yeah, agreed. Moving on, though, we've got the Adeptus Mechanicus. Again, no changes.
Okay. Again, I don't think we really expected anything for AdMech. They're one of those armies that got given so many different rules now that not many people do play the faction, I guess. So, but again, they're not an army that's really struggling or doing really good, right? Am I right in saying that?
Yeah. So Adeptus Mechanicus can very much be matchup dependent, and player skills are a huge factor here. There are players who play Adeptus Mechanicus fervently, and they're very good at it. And the army, especially Skitarii Hunter cohort, can be incredibly powerful. But the army as a whole hasn't had any great success at the tabletop, but is also not suffering that badly, as far as I can tell.
Okay.
What would have been nice to see is maybe some help for the other detachments that we never see. But I think that can be said across the board. And we'll do our own hot takes on the balanced data slate at some point anyway, probably via podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, AdMech players, let us know in the comments what you think of these. Did you feel you needed changes, or do you feel like this is probably justifiable?
Aeldari next.
Okay, new boys on the block.
Hot off a new codex. So you might normally expect quite a lot of changes, but actually there's only one. And that is Azerman.
Okay.
So we'll be glad to know that Azerman has changed. When he does his special ability for 3 damage shots, devastating wounds, and anti-infantry, it's now anti-infantry 5+, not 3+.
Okay, it's good. It's a good change. It needed to happen.
Yeah, it's nowhere near the guarantee of, oh, that's an entire 8-bound squad that's dead just by Azerman.
It still could happen, though.
It could still happen, exactly. It could absolutely still happen. And with the ability to use the Aspect Shrine tokens from the Dire Avengers in that one turn, you can guarantee 2 of those, let's say you hit 6 times, 2 of those 6 shots, you can guarantee will kill 2 models, and then you'll probably roll 1 or 2 5s anyway. So, yeah, it reduces it a little bit. It's a little less silly.
Yes, no, I agree. I think the thing is with Aeldari is because it's a brand new codex, this is actually, I think, positive from Games Workshop that they've made some changes already. Because normally when codexes have come out, they haven't made changes in a balanced data slate so soon. They normally let it go for a few months and then see how they can change it. Whereas this is quite positive that they've done it quite early.
Yeah.
I mean, arguably there could be maybe some other changes and stuff to Aeldari.
Yeah.
But that's something we're going to have to see later down the line, I think, or potentially later.
We just need more games to happen at more tournaments before GW can have a good idea of what needs to change with Aeldari.
Absolutely. All right, and what is the next faction?
Astra Militarum are up next, and they have had some significant changes.
Okay.
So Bridgehead Strike has been punched in the face.
Yep.
The +1 to wound on the drop has now changed to +1 to hit on the drop.
So significantly worsens the detachment. Obviously, +1 to wound is massive for all the weapon loadouts that you get, especially on your Scions, right? And we talk about Scions points drops as increases, in the points changes. As a guard player and playing Bridgehead Strike, do you think this is justified?
I do. Yeah, this change needed to happen. I don't necessarily think the points needed to change as well. But when you look at a Scion squad now, it does drop down. It's hit on 2s now.
Yeah.
And actually, what you get from that is you don't need to give them take aim as an order.
Okay.
So they're still very good, and you can afford to invest less orders into them to be as accurate.
Sure.
So they'll drop down. They'll hit on 2s, rerolling 1s as per their detachment rule, and then they'll reroll 1s to wound or all wounds. So it's not like it's the end of the world losing the +1 to wound. It's still quite a good detachment, but +1 to wound really put the hurt in against specific targets, elite infantry and light vehicles, which would just get absolutely wiped by these squads, because not only were there melter guns and plasma guns killing them, but the las guns are wounding on 5s or even 4s potentially with certain stratagem support.
So would you say that this change is maybe to allow mechanised assault to be a bit more viable? Because that obviously gives you +1 to wound as well by getting out of transport. So it's a different style of mechanic, but still the same buffs being given out. Do you think that that's what they're trying to achieve here?
Yeah, I suspect so. And there are, I suspect, a lot of competitive Astra Militarum players who've been eyeing up Codex detachments to potentially jump to once Bridgehead inevitably gets some kind of nerf like it has, and Mechanized Assault will be definitely up there as one of the options, because there are some obscene things you can do with elite infantry. And you'll probably shift to things like Kassakin and Tower Oxes rather than Scions. But overall, if you want the +1 to wound, it's a much more expensive package in Mechanized Assault with Scions. So it'll be interesting to see whether Scions as a whole, as a unit, fall off in guard lists or whether they keep going strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, only time will tell, Michael. Anything else with Astra Militarum?
Yes, so on Bridgehead Strike as well, they've had a stratagem changed.
Interesting.
So this is firing hot, which would allow your hotshot weaponry to get +1 strength and AP. So this is now 2 command points.
Okay.
And it has to be against a target within 12 inches.
Yeah.
The 12 inches is fine, because a lot of the time you're deep striking and being close anyway. 2 CP is where it gets a bit more difficult to use.
Are there any other 2 CP stratagems in that detachment?
No.
No, okay. I mean, we have ways in Guard, though, to get CP quite easily. We can. I don't think Guards struggle with 2 CP stratagems as a way to kind of neutralise these stratagems, do we?
No, not at all. It's all about whether 2 different 1 CP stratagems would be better for you than spending 2 on this.
Okay.
Potentially.
Interesting.
But it was very powerful.
Yeah, I mean, get an extra AP and strength on all your guns, +1 to wound, which obviously that's gone now, but the +1 to hit maybe still might be used. So we'll have to see how Bridgehead Strike does in the meta.
Now, there has been a change outside of Bridgehead, which is the Death Corps of Krieg Engineers.
Right.
So these guys, their mine now only does D3 mortal wounds, but also can only be used against a visible enemy unit within 9 inches.
Okay, right. So, because obviously it used to be D6, didn't it? D6 mortal wounds, and they were very cheap.
Someone within 12, you didn't even have to see them.
Yeah.
You just send this homing RC.
The RCX, from Call of Duty, send it through. Look, D3 mortal wounds, maybe you could have kept it as visible. Do you think that was a problem? Or do you think this is fine?
I think the change is fine, but what I would have liked to see is a points drop.
Okay.
Because it's 70 points as it currently stands for this unit. And they've been basically almost halved in a way how effective they are. Because they can't do things against things they can't see, and they've lost 3 inches of range, and they've lost D3 potential extra mortal wounds.
Yeah, absolutely.
So maybe in the future they'll get a points drop. Your beloved Blood Angels are the next faction. No changes in the balanced data slate.
Yeah.
Some points changes, which obviously you discuss over in the points video with Jake. Do you think they needed changes?
Not really. Maybe the only things I would say would be look at the Lost Brethren detachment, but that's not a balance change. There's nothing. I don't think Blood Angels are quite balanced, I would say.
Yeah.
And we will come on to Bloodless Angels later, but that's not a Blood Angels issue. I would say that's elsewhere.
Yeah.
To look at.
Yeah. Fantastic. Next we have Black Templars. No changes there either.
Do you think they needed any changes or any love?
I don't think so.
Not really seen many Black Templars competitively in the UK, especially. There's been a few, but they're not really doing amazing.
Yeah, I mean, they probably could have done with another detachment. I think that's one of those sub-factions that, because they don't have a codex like Blood Angels and Dark Angels, they probably needed a third detachment just to keep them going. Yeah. The same could be said for Space Wolves as well, to be fair.
Yeah, true.
Who also haven't had any changes. But yeah, that's Templars. Next is the Chaos factions.
Okay.
So Chaos Knights, no changes.
Do you think they needed changes? I know you've played them before, so...
Well, we know that on the roadmap we''ve got a picture of a Chaos Knight.
Yeah.
So we can probably expect something to come for them, and perhaps that's why there's been no changes here. I don't think they haven't been damaging the game, which I think is where a lot of the balanced data slate changes tend to come from, is units that damage the game.
Yeah.
So they haven't been doing that, so that's why they've been left as is.
Maybe some love for the big ones, the big knights?
Well, they had some points changes to make the big ones a bit more viable, but other than that, there's not much more you can do.
Yeah, sure.
I'd love to see some rules in there that make the big ones a bit better than just taking lots of little ones.
Yeah.
But what point does that make the big ones too good?
This is the age-old problem with knight armies, Imperial Knights as well, is you want more models to be able to score cards and do things like that for you, but then you have massive big powerhouses and the big knights that just absolutely destroy opponents. So it's trying to balance that is the difficult part of a knight army, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. What other Chaos factions are we looking at next?
Chaos Space Marines.
Okay, any changes?
No changes.
Didn't need any again?
No, didn't need any. I guess the glow up for them is there's a new Bellicor detachment in which you can run Chaos Space Marines.
Yes.
So it's interesting, I imagine, trying to balance factions that have a detachment that includes them, even as allies, because you don't want to make their units too cheap or make a unit better by giving it a different ability. So that's a shame. Needless to say, I would have loved to see some love for some of my favourite. I'm sure all of us that run or would like to run some of the detachments in the game that are not as competitive would have loved to see some changes.
Yeah.
And I would love for Games Workshop to perhaps, with a balanced data slate in the future, focus on detachments that are not seeing any play.
Yeah.
And actually lift them up rather than focusing on the things causing problems.
Yeah.
That would be nice to see in a future data slate. Maybe once they've sort of hit the nail on the head with everything that's a bit strong, they can start to look at that. But at what point are they ever going to manage that? Because new codexes are coming out all the time, and
sneaky people out there always find amazing things in codexes that other people don't see. So it's part and parcel of competitive play that there's always going to be something that's stronger than something else.
Exactly.
All right, well, Chaos Demons are up next. Now, they've had some big changes. There's a big problem list going around at the minute, right, which is the Slaanesh Demons.
Yes.
What changes have we got here?
So this was devastating the competitive scene, particularly teams, because if you could avoid certain matchups, it was nearly unstoppable. So the main detachment rule has been changed, the Seductive Gambit. So previously you got reroll hits and wounds. If you went for the Gambit, now you get reroll hits and wound rolls of 1. So you reroll all hits, but you only reroll the ones to wound. There's a lot of devastating wounds in Slaanesh Demons.
Yeah.
So this now stops you from being able to just keep going for it. And not only fish for the devil wounds, but obviously get more successful wounds in general. So a good change to tone down the damage. There's also been other changes.
All right, well, what are those changes, Michael?
So one of the stratagems, Thieves of Pain. This would allow you to pass off wounds to another Slaanesh unit and deal mortal wounds to it instead.
Okay.
And this was being used to have this unit behind a wall. In some cases, you could have the harp lady who had a 2+ feel no pain against mortal wounds, and you would pass the wounds over to them, and you basically ignore the damage.
Yeah, sure.
So what's changed here is that the person you pass, or the unit you pass the wounds to, has to be within 9 inches invisible to you. Right.
Okay.
And you can't pass the wounds to a vehicle. So I assume people were able to do it with soul grinders.
Right. Yeah.
They can't do that. A significant change. Much shorter range, and actually the gap between buildings in 40k is not, not that.
Well, you've got to expose the units now to be able to get this ability to trigger, right? So,
yes.
Whereas before, if you could just sit behind a building and you're just not targetable, especially on something that has a 2+ feel no pain, it is next to impossible to deal with that unless you can figure out a way, cunning plan of getting behind a building. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, okay, positive change there.
Yep.
Any more?
Yes, a huge change. So another stratagem, overwhelming excess, which people will know is the stratagem that stops people from being able to shoot you.
Right. Okay.
If you fail a battle shock, has now been massively overhauled. So shooting or fight phase -1 to hit.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, -1 to hit is good. Especially with the changes to the Keeper of Secrets and Shalaxi as well, from obviously the Emperor's Children Codex being brought into the index for the Demons. They no longer have that ability, do they? Apart from the Keeper of Secrets, I believe.
That's right, yeah. And of course they've lost the feel no pain as well.
Lost the feel no pain.
So this is a bit of durability you can build in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this double whammy of the nerfs to the detachment and also what we would probably call nerfs to the Keeper and Shalaxi means that Slaanesh isn't looking as good and healthy as it was before.
Or unhealthy, depending on which way you're looking at it, I guess. But I mean, there have been some positive changes on other data sheets other than the two, Shalaxi and obviously the Keeper of Secrets. So like Demonettes getting fight first and stuff is nice.
Yes,
so, there is some silver lining, I guess.
There's some silver lining. Are these changes excessive? We'll see.
I like the wordplay. It's good.
Other than that, there's no changes for the Demons.
No balance changes, but obviously data sheet changes and stuff when we come to looking at the
whole new detachment as well.
Exactly.
With Bellacore, which is cool.
Exciting.
Yeah.
All right. What is the next army we're going to take a look at?
Dark Angels.
Oh, any changes?
No changes.
Oh, okay.
No.
All right.
They're fine where they are. We haven't seen like real problems with them, I don't think.
No problems. I think Dark Angels are still one of the better Space Marine factions out there because they've got very strong data sheets, right?
Yes.
So I think, I mean, I know Stormlance has been doing quite well for Dark Angels, but obviously not breaking a game problem, so it's not anything that really needs any changes doing.
Yep.
Right.
Death Guard is next.
Any changes?
No changes.
Okay.
We know they've got a codex of the way.
True.
So I don't think we're going to see any changes.
Yep.
Likewise, actually, Thousand Suns and World Eaters don't have changes either.
Yeah.
Because obviously they've got books coming, so what's the point?
Yeah, and then none of them are breaking the game. None of them have got any issue lists at the minute that really need sorting until whenever we get those codexes in the future.
Yeah. Deathwatch, no changes.
That's an interesting one. Do you think there needed to be changes?
I don't think so. It's an interesting one. Obviously, they won the LVO, and
yeah.
obviously congratulations to that. But they haven't like stormed into the rest of the scene. They've not kind of.
I know their win rate's particularly high.
It is good.
They've got a very high win rate, but I think that's because the index is good.
Yeah.
And damage-wise, it's amazing.
The damage is great. The index is good, but you also have this core of dedicated Deathwatch players that are putting in all the time with that army, so they're very good with the army, which also builds into it. It's an army you don't see often, but when you do see it, the players probably know what they're doing with it.
I guess with Deathwatch, they're also an army. They're like a Swiss knife, where they can deal with pretty much any army in the game because that's what they're designed to do, right? They're Deathwatch, so they should be able to do that. So I guess that's probably one explanation why they're doing really well. Maybe points changes is something where they would look at potentially toning things down rather than rules. Yeah.
Points changes. They could also maybe limit the amount of units that can drop into reserve and back with the detachment because it's very powerful.
Yes.
But that's if Deathwatch start to become
a problem.
More of a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. What's the next one?
Drukhari's next. No changes.
It's becoming quite a theme, this, to be honest, and it'll be the same when we do the points as well. It's been quite a tame balanced Dataslate. I don't think Drukhari. It's like Admech, right? I think Admech and Drukhari sit in that space where they're such a specialist army that people who play the army and religiously play that army will do it very, very well.
Yeah. And their win rate almost makes up for the
rest of the people who are trying to learn the faction, like myself, trying to learn. So it's kind of, do they need changes, or is it just a very difficult army to get your teeth stuck into?
Yeah.
So yeah, didn't really expect any changes there.
Genestealer Cults is next. No changes.
This is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I don't think they needed changes. What are your thoughts on resurgency points? Do you think that since that's come in, it's actually balanced the faction slightly?
I do think it's balanced the faction. And I think GSC players have probably enjoyed it more.
Yeah.
Everybody else that's played against them has enjoyed it more. They're still very good.
Oh, yeah.
Like, still a very, very strong army. You know, Biosanctic Brood Surges still can be quite oppressive as a pressure army. But it's not as, you know, once you kill things, you kind of know certain things to come back. You both keep track of those resurgency points. It's a lot easier to manage.
There's less feels bad moments and hurdles that you could cross in a game with Genestealer Cults. As long as you know the rules going in, there's no real like room for like gotcha moments with the army, is there anymore?
Exactly. There's not like a surprise 360 or whatever points is coming back.
Or 1750.
Or 1750. You know, there's none of that. You just go, okay, I know you can bring this unit back, so I'm going to kill this unit and this unit. And then, you know, bring them back by all means, but now I know that you spent all your points, whatever. So I think they're probably sitting okay where they are at the moment.
Yeah, they're a good army.
It'll be interesting to see as time goes on, as other factions get reduced in power, whether they once again rise.
Ascension. They ascend.
They ascend, yeah.
They kind of sit to me maybe similar to Deathwatch in the fact they're a strong army that aren't really breaking the game, but like they can be done really well if you wanted to take that army in competitively.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. What's the next one?
Grey Knights is next.
Okay.
One change, which is that their hallowed ground for the Warpbane Task Force requires you to see the target to get the rerolls to hit.
Right, so the only unit that has indirect, to my knowledge, in Grey Knights is the Purgation Squad.
Purgation Squad, yeah.
I don't think I've seen them since the beginning of the 10th, to be honest.
No, I don't know who's using them to make this change even necessary.
Whoever it was, well done, you got it nerfed. But
maybe someone in head office.
Yeah, exactly.
Just stomping everybody else with Purgation Squads. And they're like, this guy!
It's too much!
I don't think I've seen them in a single Warpbane Task Force list.
I haven't either. But to be honest, I think the main problem with the Warpbane Task Force army is Dread Knights getting the ability for the most part. From playing against it and seeing it competitively, it does just feel like them next to the Purifiers. It's a very, very strong combo. So it just doesn't feel like this change really answers something that is really strong in that army. But whether or not it needed changed, I don't know.
Who knows? Once again, there is a Grey Knight Grieve on the roadmap. His shin, otherwise known as a Grieve. So that's on the roadmap, so we can hopefully expect some cool Grey Knight stuff to happen in the future.
All right, awesome. What is the next faction?
Imperial Agents is next. Unsurprisingly, no changes.
I'm almost aggrieved that there are no changes here.
Moving on. Right? Look, they probably needed help, but nobody cares.
They need help.
They probably needed help, but nobody cares.
Yeah, it's a weird
it's a sad thing, but it's just kind of giving you a way to play those really esoteric units in the Imperium, but they're not. It's one of those factions that doesn't feel like it's worth the time trying to come up with a solution to make it better. It's
one of them. Maybe in the future, if they're still struggling, there may be some support for the Imperial Agents, but they're more of like an ally for everyone else. I still see them as.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, okay. What is the next faction?
Imperial Knights.
So these guys have been doing quite well, actually, with a couple of lists.
We've seen some success. A lot of help, actually, thanks to Imperial Agents.
Yes.
We've seen Sisters of Battle Squads and Immolators helping to prop up the action economy of the army. So props to the people running that. Imperial Knights, rather, probably didn't need any changes.
No.
And we don't know if they're going to get anything. They haven't been previewed.
Not that I'm aware
it'd be interesting to see with Chaos Knights is followed by Imperial Knights or whatever. So we shall see.
Yeah, it's a weird one because, like we said, they've got a couple of lists that do quite well, but they don't feel like the menace they were at the start of 10th edition.
No.
But again, they don't also feel like they're struggling. So quite a balanced faction.
Yeah. Interestingly, some points drops on the big knights again, just like the Chaos ones, and the biggest knights actually went below 500. So you can now start to include them as allies in other factions. So I'm curious to see whether that actually starts happening now.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of firepower on them. It's just whether it's worth
Big
500
firepower.
points.
The harpoon.
Harpoon, yeah.
Harpoon, yep, I like it. In my Blood Angels list.
Yeah.
No, not happening. What's the next faction?
Leagues of Votann.
Okay.
So they have had a significant change,
Yeah.
and one for the best, I think. So their ability to give out grudge tokens is now an army rule, and they can give out 2 at the start of the game.
Right.
But their Oathband detachment that gave out 4 now only gives out 2.
So you still get about 4, but
Yes.
it's just the detachment rule gives you an extra 2
Yes.
effectively
Yeah.
to the army rule.
Yeah. So that the half band or the Hearthkin orientated detachment now gets to still give out 2 sets of 2 grudge tokens to your opponent.
Yeah.
Which is great, or judgment token, whatever they call it.
I think the positive thing here is more so the fact that they've allowed the other detachment to be a bit more on contention to be taken. Because I know that was the biggest problem with that detachment was, well, why would you ever take that? Because you're just losing 4 sets of +1 to hit and wound for your army, whereas now at least you get 2.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, what's the next faction?
Necrons are next, with no changes. They did get sort of a mini Dataslate of their own recently.
Yeah.
So the Star Shatter obviously got changed.
Yeah.
So maybe they didn't feel like they needed it this time around. Maybe they've hit the keynotes for Necrons. And we've seen a reduction in Star Shatter.
We've seen so Star Shatter's come down. I still think that there are a few problems with the Necrons in terms of
Volt.
Tesseract Vault is obviously is horrific, but I don't think what I think is the problem is the Catans being taken in multiples, loads of them, loads of Catan. But I do think that overall they're not really smashing events. They're not destroying the meta. It's not like one of those armies they were.
I mean, we've seen a resurgence in Awakened Dynasty.
Yeah.
And the Wraith Bricks coming back because they did go down in points.
Yeah.
In a previous balanced data slate. And I think we're going to start to see the rise of the Necrons again in that format.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't mind seeing maybe the Silent King, the modifiers ignoring thing, change that. It's quite strong, especially for,
it's that they have a lot of strong individual pieces, and when you combo that with like 3 or 4 Catan,
it's
very good.
Tesseract Vaults.
Or Tesseract Vaults. Yeah. Anyway,
Moving
what's the
on.
next one?
Orks is next.
Okay.
So minimal changes for Orks. We've got in the balanced data slate. The only change we've got is tank busters, and the wording's been changed for their squig bombs to just say you may use 1 squig bomb.
Yeah.
Whenever you use it, it's in an FAQ anyway that you can only use 1 at a time. But I guess they've wanted the wording now, and it means that the app will show you the answer before you need to look up whether it works. But you pointed out it's weird that Breaker Boys haven't had this change to their
there's no
data
Breaker
sheet.
Boys mentioned on there, so
Maybe they just missed it.
yeah, maybe it's just an honest mistake, but it does feel like the tank busters are being punished and the Breaker Boys aren't. They're the bully boys in this instance.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. And they've obviously got a new detachment, the Orks, as well, so maybe that might be something we look at later.
Spicy.
It's a very, very strong detachment. Let us know in the comments if you think that or Tactical Brigade is the new way to run Orks. Which one do you think is better? Let us know in the comments.
Space Marines. Okay, there's a change to Oath of Moment.
Okay.
All right, so in short, you only get your +1 to wound from Oath of Moment if you're running a detachment from Codex Space Marines. Finally happened, Jordan.
It's gone. It's gone. People can stop stealing Liberator. We've liberated Liberator.
Liberated Liberator Assault Force. Excellent.
Yeah. Positive change, I think, because it was very, very strong. And then I think this has been the problem through Temp with Space Marine Codex and supplements anyway, is either supplements doing too much to the Space Marine Codex attachments and making them too strong, and then we've had this instance where the Space Marine Codex has now completely done it to a supplement detachment.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things, right? That
this is my hot take. It's never going to be easily manageable until you completely separate the supplements from the Codex.
Agreed.
I know it's going to hurt, obviously, having less detachments, but GW are throwing detachments out left, right, and centre.
Nah, please,
So
just
you're
give
gonna
me
get
my own Codex.
Just
and
have your 3 detachments plus, Grotmus, whatever else it might be. Give them a different army rule as well to Oath of Moment.
Yes.
Just give them something that's a bit more unique.
Yeah.
And then leave them to it. Then there's less balancing you have to do. Just say your unit list includes this from Codex Space Marines.
Yeah, like you could have
and that's it.
separate assault jump intercessors for Blood Angels, or like how they've done with Emperor's Children. and like just made them have their own section away from the codex.
Yeah.
Like
Maybe let them have a few more units than what they've
a few more. Yeah. I don't want to like lose everything, but like I just love just to have my own rule, because Oath of Moment for Blood Angels, for the most part, does feel a bit pointless for the most part, right? Because there's units to just reroll hits. Death Company, for instance, right? You don't really need it. But Dark Angels could do something. They could have a really cool army rule.
Yes.
Blood Angels could have a really cool army rule. And it's like, it would just add a bit more flavour as well to armies. Oh, you're playing Space Marines. Cool, so you got Oath of Moment. Yeah. No, I want something with a bit more flavour. And like you said, it'll help with the balance, because there wouldn't be people abusing different rules or stuff like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there are a few other changes. Windswift Evasion, that's the stratagem to reactive move flat 6 in Stormlance. Only works on infantry and mounted, so not vehicles or monsters.
Okay, so probably a Dark Angels
Probably
situation.
stopping the Lion doing it, maybe.
I mean, look, he's the only one that really won, or Bjorn maybe. Look, there's Dark Angels and Space Wolves are the only two armies that I've seen really do well with Stormlance. Marine Codex really hasn't done it themselves.
We've seen one really good list over in the States with Ultramarines do very well. Storm Raven, all that stuff. But Ultramarines are a different story.
Yes. They're a blue story.
So, so having that on mounted and infantry does make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, any others?
Yeah, so the lieutenant with Phobos armor, this guy lets you move after you shot, but didn't have a requirement where you couldn't, or a restriction where you couldn't charge. That restriction has now come in.
Okay.
So, sorry to anybody that was taking it just to be able to do a D6 move and then a charge.
It was mainly a Blood Angels thing, really, because in Liberator you could do it. You'd obviously got all the extra attacks on Reavers. They'd obviously get crazy, do all this damage. And it was a very, very strong combo. Probably is fair that this happens, that you can't just charge after that, because you could just get a 3-inch charge from Deep Strike.
Well, it's a 3d6 charge, essentially. You Deep Strike and you roll 3d6 to see how close you can get. It is flat 6 now, though. You don't have to roll. Yeah. So you do at least get a flat 6. Yeah. You can still step out, maybe shoot something, and then step back in, or move, shoot, step forward 6 inches and get your Reavers in range for the OC reduction.
They'd probably be good on incursors now. Yeah. Because they can maybe jump out, give the +1 to hit, and then recycle themselves for a later turn or something.
Guarantee 6 inches of movement back, or even jump back into an impulsor.
It's a strong rule to have.
Impulsor, shoot, get back.
It's a strong rule to have. So
yeah.
Okay. Any other changes?
Yes, Euroventris.
Okay.
So he has now got keywords locked for his Deep Strike ability. That he gives a unit Deep Strike. It's Gravis, Phobos, Tacticus. So no Centurions.
Cool. Right. So no more teleporting the Teletubbies across the board.
No Teletubbies teleporting.
I mean, look, it was a very strong ability. I mean, I don't think it was used that much. It was probably the only time you was really seeing Vanguard really spearhead detachment.
Yeah. We've seen less of it as of late.
As time's gone on.
But it's nice to have that clarification in there.
Well, I will say for Space Marines, I'm surprised one person hasn't made the list.
That is all the changes, Yeah, that's all the changes.
Gilliman.
Yeah, no change.
I'm very surprised.
Every single Space Marine list is just better with Gilliman in it.
Yeah.
And we've seen it at top tables everywhere. Him, Vindicators, Ballistus Dreadnoughts, killing everything.
I'm surprised that they didn't take away his ability to pick 2.
He should have lost that in this balance. So I completely agree. Yeah. Because if you're playing Space Marines, he almost invalidates playing any other chapter.
Yeah. But I think this is, I've seen this argument quite a bit actually, is about how Ultramarines themselves, because they're included in that vanilla Space Marine category, they're almost as good, if not better, than supplement chapters. So it's like, do they then separate themselves from that and then become apart from that +1 to wound? Because they're the ones really that abuse that rule more than anyone, right?
Yeah. Honestly, I just think Gilliman needs to lose the second oath.
Yeah.
Give him some other really cool rule instead.
Yeah.
And then leave it there. I think that's the only issue, is the double oath.
Yeah, sure. He's expensive, isn't he? So it's not like you're getting a cheap character to do you loads of abilities.
But you can manipulate CP, you get the double oath, and you get an absolute weapon.
Yeah.
Additionally, so yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Space Wolves is next. No changes, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah.
What could you really do to Space Wolves? I mean, they're kind of just sat there waiting for a supplement, aren't they? At this point,
It's interesting the factions that have been picked to have new detachments.
Yes.
But I suppose it's because they don't want to take ideas that they could use and put in a codex, maybe.
Yeah, because all the ones they've given
of
have got codexes already, right? So yeah, they're probably just supplementing codex things that all armies that need supplementing. Well, I say needs, but none of those factions really needed it. Maybe Tau.
Maybe Tau. They don't have many detachments anyway.
No. But I don't think Orks needed
Orks 9 now detachments.
Yeah, they didn't need one for strength increase.
No, they could have just made one of the other ones better that's already in the book.
Yeah.
But Space Wolves, and we mentioned Black Templars earlier, those are two sub-factions waiting on a detachment. And even if it was one that they were thinking of putting in the codex, it would have been nice to just...
Or just update one of the ones they've got already.
Yeah.
Like, make it a bit more viable, potentially, or help out certain things.
Where's the Thunderwolf-focused detachment?
Oh.
You know?
I was Stormlands, man.
All about Thunderwolves, but better than Stormlands.
But better than Stormlands.
Yeah, Battle Line Thunderwolves.
Yes. Oh, no.
Logan Grimnam must be your warlord.
Michael, stop. No, Michael. Please.
Black Templars, Battle Line Primaris Crusader Squads.
Please stop.
Or other Brotherhood, Sword Brothers.
Sword Brethren.
Sword Brethren.
Just get some Battle Line Sword Brethren.
Line Sword Brethren.
Oh, no. Okay, Michael, you've gone too far here, okay? What's the next faction?
We've got Tau. No changes. New detachment, which is cool.
That is the change, really, then, isn't it?
That's it.
New detachment. Do you think they needed anything, Tau? It's such a weird situation with Tau because I don't think they're struggling.
No.
As an army. They've definitely got strengths. The problem is, I think, is because they only work in one phase of the game, there are hard counters to it, which is the same as World Eaters, right? Is they're always going to have a hard counter to them. So is that what stops them from being really good, is because their counters are doing better?
I think it is because they have that bad matchup. Because there will be Tau players that do very, very well, but they'll lose maybe one game in a tournament, and that will be because there's a certain matchup, or they weren't able to play perfectly for that game, and that's what's going to happen with Tau, because they're so focused on one phase. Like Votann, for example, had the infiltrating kill team arrive, and that kind of helped them out a lot. It gave them some mid-board presence to allow them to scout move. And maybe Tau needs some kind of weird niche unit that fulfills a specific role, but they simply don't have it. And that could be what's stopping them from getting success.
Well, let us know in the comments what that role is. What, as a Tau player, what do you think your army is missing? Let us know in the comments. Cool. What is the next faction?
Thousand Sons. No changes. Obviously, there is a codex on the way, on the horizon.
Thousand Sons are another faction where they've done really, really well. Like, they've been one of those sleeper, crazy good factions. They've done really well competitively. They've had a few changes, and then it's kind of, you've seen them on the back foot a little bit, but still a menace on the tabletop. Do you still see them competitively viable at the minute? Yeah,
they certainly are. And they'll, for them, players who don't really understand how Thousand Sons work, or maybe haven't played them enough, will not even know what hit them. When they got absolutely demolished by Thousand Sons.
You did everything wrong.
And there are players out there like TJ Lanigan who do very, very well with these armies, and it's a struggle to even try and beat them. But it's not a faction, again, that is easy to pick up or is easy to get success with. So again, it's another army, and there are quite a few in 40k armies that are quite niche. Players who play them religiously will do very, very, very well with them, but their win rate is made up for by the players who are trying to do well with the faction, but not quite hitting the notes.
Or played Space Marine 2, saw Thousand Sons, they look cool, and went, that's my beginner army, and then literally lost a bunch of brain cells playing the game.
And they're like, these Terminators are terrible.
Oh, no. They were really good in the game. Right, what's the next faction?
Tyranids next. No changes.
Don't think they needed any, really, did they?
They're in a decent spot right now.
They've had some points changes, so that will help or maybe stop or change a few things. I actually, when we talk about it, the points kind of wash out anyway, so they'll probably just stay where they are, I reckon.
Yes, agreed. We've then got World Eaters as the final army with no changes, but again, we've got a codex on the way, and we'll see what happens with that.
All right. Quite a quiet balanced data slate.
It is quiet, and I think my overall hope is that next balanced data slate, not only do we fix maybe any issues that crop up with some of the new codexes, but we also start to focus on detachments or armies that need a little bit of love.
Yeah.
Let's go back to Space Marines and revisit the first company task force. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever run that at a tournament, surely.
No, I tried to.
You tried to?
I tried to do for one gimmick. And
one gimmick. So let's just go back and go, right, cool. Let's give them and if you want to know what our thoughts for fixing that detachment, it's on the masterclass.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for me, I'd love to see Dread Talons fixed. I'd love to see some changes with Dread Talons. Just do mortals when people fail battleshot tests.
Ooh,
suddenly,
nice.
The army's good.
Yeah.
You were saying Lost Brethren earlier, and obviously these are just obviously our favourite, our fan favourite picks. But what detachment do you think needs a look at to make it better? Because I think that I'd really like to see GW focus on bringing a few things up so they see a bit more play.
No, I completely agree. I think we focus a lot most of the time on, oh, that's really strong. I wish that wasn't as strong. But what about the things that we're not looking at? Why don't we look at a certain detachment? Is that because it just isn't our play style, or does it really need something that will just give it a click, right? Like Lost Brethren, give chaplains the ability to take enhancements. Yeah. And that sort of stuff, right, would then maybe help that detachment a bit more. So like that sort of thing is what we mean. So let us know in the comments what you would like to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got to remember that, yes, competitive play in tournaments is all about sometimes having the best list. But people do want to just play games with thematic, lore-accurate armies, even at tournaments.
Yes.
It is, there's so much more to it than just winning with the strongest armies. And I think I'd love to see GW revisit what is really important in Warhammer, which is allowing people to access and play what they love, even in a tournament setting.
Yeah. Absolutely.
They don't have to win the tournament. Just give them a little bit of a chance.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see more fun and diverse armies on the table is what we want to see, right?
Yeah.
All right, well, Michael, thank you for going through that with me. And hopefully this has helped you understand what has changed in the balanced data slate and the impacts that we feel it's going to have on the game of Warhammer 40k. Now, we hope to see you in the next video. And don't forget, we have checked out the points. That is in a separate video to this, so you can check that out using the link at the end of this video or in the description. And we'll see you over there next.